Okay, good to go.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody, and I'd like to begin by welcoming any members of the public and press who may be watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. And members, you're by now aware of the need to keep your video camera switched on, please, if you possibly can, during the duration of the meeting, and to keep your microphone muted except when invited to speak. And as ever, please click the raised hand function if you wish to ask a question or comment during the meeting. Obviously, always a risk as ever that we might run into technical problems. I hope not. I understand other committees have done. We've had thunder and lightning interrupting things in the past. So should this happen, you know, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast may have to be paused. But if it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may ultimately have to be abandoned until we can reconvene. Can I remind members and officers that all virtual meetings are recorded. So item 1 on our agenda is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Have we had any apologies today, Tamar?
No official apologies at the moment, but no Councillor Giles or Councillor Harrison at the moment.
Hopefully they may be able to join us, and Dan's looking out for them to let them into the meeting. Do any, I'm going to begin by calling names of all members of the committee just to establish your presence or otherwise. So when I ask you to do so, please unmute your microphones. And as we've said, we've received no apologies for absence. So Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Present.
Councillor Adela Costello.
Present.
Councillor Sandra Crawford.
Yes.
Derek Giles. I think we still can't see Councillor Giles. By calling names of all members of the committee. Councillor Harrison, can you? Yes, yeah, sorry. We can hear your YouTube presentation, I think. Thank you. Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Present.
And Councillor Nicola Harrison.
Present.
Welcome. Good to see you here, Nicola. Councillor Mark Howell.
Present.
Councillor David Wells.
Present.
Councillor Graham Wilson.
Present.
And myself, Councillor Anna Bailey. Thank you everybody for attending. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest for items on the agenda? If so, please raise your blue hand function. I'm not seeing anybody indicating, so I'll take that as a no. Thank you very much. So item 2 on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting on the 11th of June, and we're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting as a correct record. Can I ask any member who doesn't agree with this proposal to click the raise hand function on the right of your screen now? So I'm not seeing any objections to that, so I will take that as approval of the minutes as a correct record, and that the minutes are carried. On that basis, I will sign the minutes when I'm next able to, when we're next back in the office. Item 3 is the action log. Do any members have any questions? It's pretty self-explanatory where we're up to. Most of the items completed. Any members got any queries on the action log? If so, please raise your hand. No, not seeing anybody. Okay, so no members have indicated they wish to speak, so we'll just take the action log as noted. Item 4 on the agenda is petitions and public questions. We haven't received any public questions or petitions today, so we'll move to the next item of business, which is item 5, housing related support services. Lisa Sparks has kindly joined us. So Lisa, if you could please introduce your report when you're ready. For some reason, Lisa, we're not hearing you, although you do appear to be unmuted. I'm wondering if it's something to do with your...
Is that better?
That's it. We've got you now.
Okay. Right. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to start by just giving a quick overview on where we are in terms of the COVID response and rough sleeping, because obviously that's had quite an impact across the county. Following the government directive around accommodating all rough sleepers as a protective measure, both for the individuals and for the public, we now have large numbers currently accommodated in what's being referred to as COVID temporary accommodation across the county. As of the 26th of June, there were 278 individuals accommodated in this emergency accommodation, the majority of those in Cambridge, Fenland and Peterborough. Whilst they've been accommodated, support and welfare packages have been provided to all of those who have wanted to engage in that support. There's been a massive partnership response from both the third sector and the statutory services. And the positive is we have actually got an unprecedented opportunity at the moment to engage with and accommodate this vulnerable group of people, some of whom have not engaged with services for quite a number of years. At the present time, the authorities are all working on providing support and move on plans for all of those individuals. So trying to do assessments with everybody. And then the next step is to try and look at what interim or more permanent accommodation might be available for those individuals across the county. Some of those will still need some form of support, if not as an interim measure, but as a longer term requirement. So obviously the challenge at the moment is to try and accommodate that number of people, particularly as some of the hotels currently being used are looking to go back to their normal commercial business, so have given notice and are wishing for the spaces to be vacated. The Housing Related Support Commission services are supporting as much as they can. At the moment, all of our services for homeless adults particularly are prioritised their vacancies for those who are currently in the COVID temporary accommodation, just to help to try and move that through. And also the Housing First service that is sort of gradually developing and up and running is providing an opportunity for some people as well. So that just gives you a quick overview. In terms of the housing related support paper, you'll see that the progress we have made has been highlighted at 1.3, but essentially we're here today because there has been quite an impact from COVID on the delivery of our timetable. It has affected, in terms of the providers, they've had to retrench and focus all of their attention on the current pandemic, understandably, which has meant that they've had to change their delivery approach, look at their staffing, and also manage quite a lot of negative client behaviours. We've then been unable to undertake a lot of the market engagement or stakeholder engagement that we needed to actually inform the new models and progress further, so that we could get to a stage where we could actually go out to tender. And as I'm sure you'll agree, trying to undertake a competitive process during the pandemic would have had significant risks, and we've highlighted those at 2.1.3. So in summary, the delays mean we can't commence the new contracts from the 1st of April 21 as we were intending. Hence, we're here today seeking an extension to allow us to pick up and move forward with the work, as well as incorporating any learning from COVID into the models. The impact will be that we need an additional 9 months added to the existing contracts, so that we'd be looking at new contracts starting from the 1st of January 2022 instead.
Very much indeed, Lisa, and thank you for putting that into context with the very rapid work that's been undertaken during the COVID-19 crisis. And obviously, you know, government has a whole new agenda around this as well, which is all positive. So members, if anybody wishes to ask a question or make a comment, please use your raised hand function. And I can see Councillor Wilson was already in there. So Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Anna. I was hoping to raise a couple of questions about the rough sleeper statements first, and then perhaps when we've dealt with that, come back about some questions on the main paper. So on the rough sleeper statements, Lisa, I think you said 278 people, mainly from Cambridge, Fenland and Peterborough.
Yes.
Clearly we're interested in Cambridgeshire without Peterborough, so are you able to tell us what the numbers for Cambridge are?
So
and also what all this is costing us?
Okay, so without the Peterborough numbers, it's 179. because 99 of those people are in Peterborough. In terms of cost, I haven't got the cost information, because predominantly a lot of the costs are being picked up by the district councils rather than the county. We're supporting with the existing housing related support services we have, but the costs of accommodation and some of the other wraparound support and welfare support are predominantly coming through the district councils.
And district councils have obviously received, you know, specific help and support from government funding around
They
that.
have had some,
I mean,
yeah.
I can certainly speak for East Cambridgeshire, where I know we've housed around 6 or 7 people that wouldn't normally perhaps, you know, be entitled to help and support around housing. But because of COVID, they have been housed. But actually, I think we've managed to do that at nil cost because of existing relationships with housing providers in the districts. But I know it's been a significant problem in other areas of the county. But obviously, the costs to date, I think, have been more or less covered by government grants. But obviously, there's huge concern going forward around what is a very expensive bill, I think. Councillor Wilson, had you finished on that point, and then I'll come back to you on the main paper?
Yes, no, I'm finished on that point.
Did the others sort of put their blue hands up? This is on the main paper, I take it. So I'll go in order. And if you want to put your hand up again, Councillor Wilson, that's probably the best thing. So I've got Councillor Nicola Harrison, I think, next. Or I think Mark Howell, Councillor Howell, you had your hand up and then it disappeared. Were you next? No.
I believe that Councillor Harrison just beat me to it.
Okay. Councillor Harrison, off you go.
Hopefully it's not a competition. I mean, I mainly wanted to recognise the work that's been done, you know, in an emergency. It's a remarkable number of people, you know, and it's great. You know, well done to everybody, including central government and everything about it. One does worry, doesn't one, about the transition, you know, for such a large number of people, and a cohort that is probably, you know, contains a lot of people who are not in them, you know, not in the normal cohort really, and have, well, I mean, you could even say some of them have probably squeaked in, and I mean, I'm not moaning about that, but what it means then is that you've got you know, you have got you know, probably a group of people, some of whom are going to, you know, find it harder than others, as it were, to get themselves housed, and sort of, or, you know, it's going to be complicated anyway, isn't it? And no doubt we'll get updates. Well, you know, we'll get updates in the normal way and things. Obviously, very sorry that you've had to delay the review again. I mean, bad luck, because I know you want to get on with it, but obviously this is the right thing to do. And I suppose the only other thing I was going to say just about cost, just as, you know, I suppose it does make sense, doesn't it, for there to be something that is visible, even bearing in mind, you know, that most of the costs are falling on the districts. It would be perhaps sensible that there is a cost that's visible, that we can see that the county council is bearing on this, maybe for next time, or, you know, would that be reasonable to ask for that?
I think I'm right in saying, I'm looking to officers to confirm, but I think I'm right in saying that is picked up through the General Purposes Committee, but
yes. Okay.
In terms of you know, lost opportunity around savings and additional.
Well, yes, because I think that's specified actually, isn't it, in our paper, is the amount that, you know, that problem. But yeah, no, I was thinking more of any, you know, any direct costs that there are. But I mean, if there aren't, you know, well then fine, that's good. That's good.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Crawford.
On mute. I'd like to make a helpful suggestion, if I may. I was very concerned on the report on the rough sleepers and the challenge presented by trying to move these people to alternative accommodation after living in hotels. In the city of Cambridge, we have had what was called the first of their kind micro homes, or pods for homeless people. And they seem like a relatively inexpensive way of transitioning people into having somewhere decent to live instead of tramping around the streets. And I wondered if councillors who live in the outer parts of the county, not just the city, would be prepared to take that as a model for helping people in their area. It seems to me like a really good idea, and not hugely expensive. That's it, really.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. I'll ask Lisa just to comment in a minute. I mean, as ever on this subject, we're in danger of straying into district council territory, really, aren't we? This is an ongoing problem on this subject, because obviously the county council always wants to be supportive, and this is why it's imperative that we work in partnership on this stuff, because whilst, you know, homelessness and rough sleeping is very firmly the remit of the district councils and Cambridge City Council, you know, it soon falls into being an issue for the county council, because often people need support that can turn into, you know, full-on adult social care support, which is why, you know, it needs to be a holistic response. Lisa, was there anything you wanted to say around the new sort of housing first approach, etc.?
No, I mean, the pods that Councillor Crawford referred to have gone up with Jimmy's. So they're separate to the rough sleeping response, but the City Council are also looking at how they can use pods to maybe help accommodate some of the people interim. The challenge there is there still does need to be some sort of support offer with those, and also it's around where they can be located and how that fits with planning guidance and things like that. In terms of housing first, following the county's successful bid to the ministry to get money, I'm pleased to say that the Counting Every Adult team have actually recruited to nearly all of the posts now, and a number of those people are already in post and are now starting to pick up cases, and those people who are prime candidates for housing first are already being identified, and they're looking at suitable properties for those individuals. So it's incrementally building across the county. Initially we've started to deliver in Cambridge City, but they're now looking to roll out in Fenland as well very shortly.
Great, thank you very much. It's all positive.
It is.
Councillor Wilson, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions on the paper, if I may. One, it talks about the delivery of savings with more to come, and the total being nearly £600,000. So I'd just be interested in how those are being achieved with all the provisos that have been included about the impacts of COVID-19. The ARC4 report is clearly going to be very significant, and I wonder when that is finished, whether it could be circulated to members so that we can see it. There is reference to a member reference group, and I think that would be something which we would definitely support, and either Nicola or I would be happy to join that. Because the consultation on the commissioning strategy is clearly going to be extremely important. And then the final comment is we're asked to approve the various extensions to the contracts, which in principle I'm very happy to do. I just wanted to get confirmation that there's no increase in price due to inflation or otherwise. These are purely just extension of time at the same rates. So a selection of comments there, Anna.
Councillor Wilson, so we've got four main points there, Lisa. I have made a note if you run out of steam. So
I'll have a go.
On the savings first.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the savings, our intention for the savings has always been to look at doing that through service redesign, which is why it's incredibly important for us to have the time to actually have that meaningful engagement about what models, what services will look like in the future. That is still our intention as a way for driving through savings. In terms of the ARC4 report, we have recently got a final version, so we will be able to circulate that soon to members. There will be quite a wide consultation on that report. It's been delivered in partnership with the district councils, and obviously there's quite a lot in there that impacts on district council partners as well. So we're just looking at how we manage that consultation and distribution sensitively across the piece. But yeah, once it's all finalised, then we will be hoping to get it out to members and to the wider public as well.
And the member reference group?
So the member reference group had started. Unfortunately, we'd only had one meeting before we went into the COVID lockdown. Councillor Harrison is a member of that group. Our intention is to get that up and running again as soon as we can. So we'll be looking at dates quite well shortly, and we'll probably just also want to confirm that those people who volunteered are still happy to take that work forward.
In terms of the extensions to contracts?
Yeah, there's no inflation. That is just a 9-month extension at the current value.
Right. Thank you very much, Lisa. Is that okay, Councillor Wilson?
Yep, no, that's excellent. I was thinking Nicola was already on it, but it just reappeared. So I just wanted to double check. It wasn't anything different. Thank you very much.
I think Nicola, after all her very detailed work that she did in Cambridge City, was perfect candidate to be on the working party. I know she believes very passionately in the sort of way forward in the Housing First model. Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, if you don't mind, I want to go back to at the very beginning when we was talking about different things with regards to the homeless situation now as opposed to the actual paper itself. I just want to clarify one or two little things because I've been involved with somebody to do with the homeless situation as things at the moment. So as far as I'm aware, and I would just like some clarity, if anybody presents themselves as homeless at the moment in Cambridgeshire or Peterborough, they are, shall we use the word entitled, I'm just using that word, to be accommodated somewhere at the moment. I'm just here a nodding of the shaking of the head, so I just want some clarity on that. But also the fact that, does that also apply to people with no recourse to public funds? And how long do we think this will go on for? Do we have any idea about that at all? So three questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. In terms of accommodating, the rule is around the COVID emergency accommodation is for people who are rough sleeping or at risk of rough sleeping. General homelessness presentations will go through district councils as they generally would, with people applying as homeless and their case being investigated. In terms of the accommodating the people in the emergency accommodation, the majority of the districts are trying to do some sort of verification process. So they're verifying these people as rough sleepers or at risk of rough sleeping and then offering accommodation. The offer does apply to EEA nationals. There are a number of those in accommodation across the county, particularly high numbers in Fenland compared to Cambridge, and they are also included in the work to try and find suitable move on accommodation. I believe the government's just introduced a relaxing of a derogation order to allow people to be accommodated if they would generally not qualify under the rules. And in terms of how long it's going to go on for, that's varying slightly across the county because it's dependent on how long people have got the current accommodation for. All of the districts are looking to try and get plans in place now to move people through. Cambridge are using a number of different sites, and some of those, for example, will cease to be available to them at the same volume anyway about middle of this month. So that will sort of mean that they've got to try and move people at least into some other temporary accommodation, but they're still waiting to find out around allocations of funding for some of the additional units that have been promised by central government as well. That may well have an impact on how quickly people can be moved. We're then looking at options such as hostels, and also for some people independent accommodation might be an option, as well as shared housing.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I do have one more or two other questions, but what I'll do, I have the telephone number of Ms. Sparks. I'll contact her and do it that way. But thank you.
Very much, Councillor Howell, and thank you for those comprehensive answers and quite a good discussion, I think. Councillor Howell, if you've finished, could you put your blue hand down? I'm not seeing anyone else indicating that they wish to speak, and I've heard no objections to the paper or the recommendations, so there seems to be a sort of general consensus around the recommendations, so I propose to take it now. So if anybody does disagree with any of the recommendations, could you please raise your blue hand now? Okay, so I will take that as unanimously agreed. I'm not seeing any objections there at all. Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you for the ongoing work in this area. It's been a long process, but you know, naturally interrupted by COVID-19, and does give rather a new perspective on the whole importance and work in the future. So you know, we'll take that positively, I think. Right, moving on to item 6, which members were sent under separate cover. Obviously, under the usual reasons, the reason for lateness was obviously to allow the report to contain the most up-to-date information possible, and for urgency, obviously, so that the committee can be briefed on the current situation in relation to the council's response for COVID-19. And I think Charlotte and Will are doing a bit of a double act, and so over to you, Charlotte. I think you're first.
Yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is, I think, our third report of this kind. We've took a decision to include as much information as we could based on the questions that you raised at the last committee. So I really hope it's helpful. I'm just going to go through a few key points. I'm not going to go through it in detail. So I guess the main thing I would say at this stage is that we are doing a combination of continuing to respond whilst also moving into recovery. We recognise that there could well be further peaks ahead, and we're already starting to get some examples of some quite complex cases, needs that have developed and during the lockdown period and may have escalated, as well as lots of really good examples of where actually the community has stepped in and provided fantastic support. So it's really quite a mixed picture, and I think at this stage we're still waiting to see, in a sense, where demand for adult social care, what that will look like, and I think it's going to be an evolving picture. So really the paper sets out the various activities that we're doing. We're trying to get staff back to work through a sort of thorough risk assessment process, which is working really well. We're reviewing the discharge to assess arrangements that we set in place with the health service to see what have we learnt from that, how do we do discharge to assess going forward, and most importantly, prepare really for the point where probably the central government funding will end, and what's the system that we're going to have in place. We're also making sure that we consult our staff and our partners and our partnership boards on sort of challenges and opportunities ahead, and we're getting some really useful feedback and intelligence on that. Because we need to understand the implications of lockdown and the demand that's ahead, as well as what have we learned. So what have we learned about how we could do things differently in future? So I've just halfway through a series of workshops with all the adult social care staff, asking them for their views. And it's very interesting in that one of the things they have said is that families actually really have appreciated the fact we'd be able to do things like assessments and reviews remotely at weekends. Because actually that's when they're available, they want to be involved, and they're actually in many cases really quite comfortable with doing it as long as there's a screen, preferably, as well as a phone line. You know, so it's really interesting. I think it's challenging some of our assumptions about what good practice is, and actually what it is that the people who we support think we should be doing differently. So we're getting some good feedback. There is lots of unknowns in terms of demand going forward. So as I said, questions around what's the impact of the lockdown. We've come across quite a few people whose needs have increased, their mobility has reduced, and just the result of people not being able to access services in the normal way. And many of you as members will be aware of those situations. Lots of situations where family have stepped in. And so we're waiting to see what will happen there actually, and will some of that family support continue, or as people start to go back to work, is that likely to mean that actually people's sort of need for formal support increases? We're talking to carers all the time. Carers, I think it's a huge generalisation, but we have got quite a lot of carers now who've sort of said, I've lasted this long, but I do now need some additional support. So we're getting more requests for respite care. As the NHS starts to move towards sort of something resembling business as usual, which they're still working through, we are starting to get more demand through the hospitals, and we're also aware we've got quite a lot more people now who are meeting eligibility criteria for adult social care. So there are a few indicators of demand changing, but also there's been some really fantastic examples of where, as I say, family have stepped in and the community have stepped in actually. So the community hubs have been a really fantastic addition, and I think the challenge will be how do we retain that going forward. So yeah, very much a sort of, we thought it was best to give you as much information as we could, and I'll hand over to Will. I'm very happy to answer any questions once he's had a chance to cover his areas of responsibility.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Over to Will.
Yes, thank you. So, as Charlotte said, we're moving into a recovery and resilience phase from a commissioning perspective. There's a lot of work going on with our partners at the moment, really to try and understand the demand going forward and therefore the likely capacity requirements. So, and they're really coming in three categories. One is the NHS returning to business as usual, winter pressures, and the potential for a second COVID wave. As part of that, we've been working really closely with the market and providers, and trying to support the providers where we can. You'll remember from the last committee, we talked about going out and increasing the block beds, and that tender is going out in July. As part of that, we've signalled a shift towards new models of care, so specifically care suites and place-based and outcome-based commissioning. We've now rolled out the first phase of the infection control money, and we have developed a care home support plan, which is supported by a detailed action plan that the system has signed up to. And that includes things like strengthening the workforce support through MDTs and strengthening local community responses. We are conscious that a significant amount of support has gone in to meet the market, and that comes to an end at the end of September. So we're engaging with providers and care associations actually to understand the local needs going forward in relation to the demand and the capacity requirements. And the expectation is that we'll bring a summary of that back to committee. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Will. So members, over to you. If you'd like to ask any questions or make any comments, please indicate using the raised hand function. Just to say, it's an incredibly detailed and comprehensive report, and just to remind members, draw the attention to the two appendices as well, which I found particularly helpful and really interesting to see the mapping as well of the community support, which has been phenomenal, really. So thank you for a very, very comprehensive report, which if anybody out there is, particularly interested in the response around adult social care, there's so much information in there. It's great. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will cut my speech short now because you've just said partly what I was going to say. So, ditto on the fact. I think it is a fantastic report and the information flow. Charlotte and I had a briefest chat just before the meeting started, and I think we should be looking at all angles possible, and I don't know what they are, but all angles possible. Certainly working with the C&P committee and doing all we can to not just captures almost the wrong word, but to encourage an ongoing positivity that's come out of COVID in the local communities. All the good volunteering work that some would actually argue the good neighbourly work that's been done for centuries. People just checking on the neighbour and doing the shopping. Actually, this has almost formalised that, and there's so much goodwill out there that yes, there's lots of sad and very, very sad and very negative stories out there, but there's so much positivity, and I think it would be remiss of us not to do our best to capture that and encourage that in some way going forward. So I would encourage officers to reach out across to communities and partnership. This is very much what's happened. It really fits the whole Think Communities remit, and I think it's kind of beholden on us to do everything we can to capture it, bottle it, and use it.
Yeah, I think Well said, and I think that is absolutely happening, and I think there's a huge flavour of that in the report, and absolutely critical, and it's, you know, whole different future potentially, which is what we've been working towards, and this is sadly but accelerated it, I think. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with that entirely. I'm very involved in what's going on locally with our community group, or groups, but I just feel that I don't know as much as I would like to know about what is happening within local care homes. And I only hear of spikes in infection rates through the media or through gossip on Facebook or whatever. And I would prefer if officers were regularly briefing members if there were instances of problems in their localities, rather than us having to find out separately. So I know we've had this discussion previously, Chair, but I still feel it's a gap, and I noticed Councillor Costello nodding in reaction to my comment there. The other question I wanted to raise was about finance, and there's something like £15 million to be found. I just wanted to check what the assumptions were around that, and based on some of the things that Will was saying, like some of the support care homes is due to finish in September, but we expect we're going to have to provide further support after that. This presumably takes us up to the end of the financial year, and is your best estimate of what that cost might be, allowing for the additional investment that we might need to do and the savings that we won't be able to achieve. And then has anybody had any thought about next year, because of the rate of this is going, with a second wave and winter pressures and business as usual recovery from the NHS? I wouldn't mind betting that this begins to have implications for the county council in 21-22 as well. And at some stage, we need to start thinking about that year.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So we'll take those one at a time. In terms of the finances, it's probably just worth reminding anybody that's listening that the £15.5 million gap is across the whole council, although clearly a significant proportion, you know, is down to adult social care, and we review it regularly at the General Purposes Committee, but we can certainly try and get some more detail on that. Charlotte, and I suspect Wendy might want to come in on the issue on care home outbreaks, and perhaps say something about the new test and trace programme as well in relation to that. Might be helpful.
I'm happy to start on the care homes. So, Councillor Wilson, if there was an outbreak of concern, we would let local members know. What I've been doing on a regular basis is making sure the chief execs of the districts are aware of outbreaks in their area, and then they've been making a decision on who to let know locally. We do have to be very careful, and I think I've talked about this before. In the information that we used to get was given to us voluntarily by the care homes, and it wasn't necessarily accurate. It was their thoughts on where they thought they were at. Our role has been to listen to what the care homes are telling us and then work with them to put the right support in, particularly around the infection control. I am pleased to say the report I had today shows a big drop in the outbreaks within care homes, which is incredibly positive, and very positive about the improvement in infection control measures generally across all of our care homes. There is a report that goes out on a weekly basis now, the ONS report, that gives the data in terms of deaths within our care homes in the different districts. If you haven't seen that, Councillor Wilson, I'm happy to send that on to you. It is sent to a variety of different members, so I'm very happy to provide that if that's helpful.
That would be useful. I don't know whether members of the Adults Committee regularly get it. I think it goes to the Health Board, and then occasionally our rep sends it on, but it'd be useful if it came to us, particularly as we're responsible for care homes and commissioning.
No problem. I'll make sure that that's sent out all to you on the weekly basis. When we get that, I'll ask Liz Robin, our Director of Public Health, to put this committee on the distribution list.
Thank you. Chair, can I just come back about the finance bit? Because I was looking in...
Sorry, Councillor Wilson, just to, before we move on to your next part, can you just comment on test and trace in relation to outbreaks in care homes and other locations, and you know, the improvements that we might hope to see in terms of data and that sort of thing? Is it worth a comment on that, given that we've, you know, just implementing our test and trace plan?
Yeah, do you want me to do that?
Thank you.
So, as you probably know, we signed off the outbreak plan last Friday because we had to get that into government. And what's happening this week is a very, very detailed action plan, which will come out for everybody to see, that particularly thinks about how the test and trace will work within different settings. So that includes things like care homes, in our schools, in particular factories, etc., etc. And basically what we would hope with the test and trace is that it gives us a lot of information on where there are positive tests of people with COVID-19 to enable us to think about what the knock-on effect might be in other areas, so we can put preventative measures in very quickly. So if actually we identify an outbreak in a certain area, we'll try and think about what the connectivity is in that area as well and get out preventative measures so people can actually take action to prevent further spread of the virus. But again, I'm very happy to make sure you will get a copy of the implementation of the outbreak plan to this committee.
That's great. Thank you very much, Wendy. That's helpful. And then in terms of the 15.5 million council-wide gap and the assumptions around that, and then Graham's concerns about moving into next year.
And sorry, Anna, before you continue, I was looking at 2.3.11 and the line, which I think is only for this committee, and I was mistaken that the previous month was 15.3 million and the current 4-year estimate for this committee is 19.3 million. So it's not, I wasn't, quite rightly, I wasn't looking county-wide because other committee is not responsibility of us, but I was only in the adults issues.
Fair enough. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. That's a helpful pointer. Who wants to? Wendy, do you want to come in?
Will might chip in on this, but just broadly, really. I think you know that what we have done is we've put business cases in that were pulled together and sent to MHCLG in relation to what we have spent, but also what we're likely to spend. So we really have thought about what we're going to need to spend going forward. We know, actually, I think there's going to be an announcement today, if it hasn't already happened, about some more additional monies coming to local authorities. So obviously we're all keeping our fingers crossed. But I want you to be reassured that we are working now on what we're calling our recovery and resilience plan in relation to adult services, on how we're going to manage financially going forward, including the different models of care that we might need post-COVID. Obviously, you know that the broader deficit within any council's funding, and every council I know is showing a deficit in terms of what monies we've had into what they've had to spend. Obviously, GPC will think about actually what we do about that, but that's broader, not just for this committee. Will, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to add, there's been a really helpful piece of work by all the Section 151 officers across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, including combined authority, all local authorities, basically, sort of to help inform our MPs about the situation across the whole county. And that's been, I think, really, really valuable piece of work. Sorry, carry on, Will.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that there's really not much else to add to what Wendy has already said. I think that there's a huge amount of work being done in the recovery and resilience plan, and I think that within itself will identify areas where more investment might be required going forward.
Very much. Councillor Wilson.
And just to be clear, is that going to include consideration of next year, 2021-22?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
And obviously there's huge concerns in terms of collection rates of council tax and business rates from the district, you know, going into next year as well. It's a massive concern, collective concern. Okay, well, members, I'm not seeing any other people indicating that they wish to speak. We are simply asked to note and comment on the progress made to date in responding to the impact of coronavirus for areas within our remit of this committee. Oh, Councillor Harrison, do you want to just get in there?
I'm ever so sorry. I thought
Okay.
I'd put my hand up, but I haven't. I have just got a couple of questions, if I may.
Oh.
Just about carers. In the report, there's a couple of sort of examples given, or case study type situations given about, you know, efforts that are going on. What is the general view now about, you know, whether carers are okay, you know, whether yeah, you know, just as a general.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one to generalize about, actually, because I think, yeah, we have some carers who are definitely struggling. So carers of people with learning disabilities who are starting to ask now for respite care, and wherever we can respond. That was a query at the last committee. We are absolutely doing that. So we're looking for solutions all the time. Our carers team told me yesterday that they are now getting more carers who, when they call up and say, how are you? They kind of say, I'm kind of at the end of my rope, really, in terms of the extent to which I can continue to manage. But then there are also quite a lot of carers who are quite worried about lockdown being relaxed and shielding ending and the consequences of that. So I think we've yet to really find out how carers are. It will be a really big part of our recovery work going forward. I mean, it was already a big focus for us. But it's also important, I guess, to remember a lot of the people who we recognise as carers have people who sort of formally recognise themselves as carers. There are a huge number of people who I'm sure we all know who would never describe themselves as a carer, but they actually are. And so I think, as well as the formal support that comes from the council and from you know, the voluntary sector organisation Caring Together that we commission, I think actually the work in the neighbourhoods is just as important, because that's about, it's the small, anyone who is a carer says it's the small things that make a difference. It's not the big things. It's the daily offers of help and support. So I think that's where the sort of neighbourhood-based approach becomes really, really important. The people who are doing a lot of unpaid caring would never describe themselves as a carer, but actually they are. So I think the full picture's yet to emerge, but I think it would be very mixed. But my general summary, I think, would be that I think that there's a lot of carers now who are at the point now that they need some more support.
That is a bit, you know, thanks for that. It's a bit bothering, isn't it? You know, I mean, that is your view. I mean, if one was to ask, you know, what would an emergency programme for carers look like? You know, supposing you were really worried, Charlotte, supposing actually you were so worried that you weren't able to just say to me, well, look, you know, we're a bit worried, but we're, you know, what would you do if you were really, really worried?
Well, it's what we already do. So, you know, the reasons why particularly many older people do get moved into a residential setting is because they've reached the point where their carer can no longer manage, and that's why we have respite care, which we offer to people as well, in terms of carers of people with learning disabilities in particular, and some older people. So we do have things that we can do, and we do have things that we do in an emergency situation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the respite care thing, you know, and maybe just, I mean, wouldn't a response perhaps be that, you know, an emergency thing would be to increase the availability of respite care, if that's possible?
Yes, I mean, definitely.
It probably isn't. You know, thinking about people going more into residential accommodation, of course, is exactly the, you know, the sort of upshot that we don't want. And I suppose it's why I'm asking, in a way, the question, or partly why I'm asking the question, anyway, yes. Just pressing you a bit on sort of actually what, you know, action might, you know, we might look for, you know, to prevent trouble from arising, but also really simply because, you know, one's heart just stretches out.
Yeah.
People in this situation, doesn't it? Totally recognizing, as you say, that it's not just about people who are formal carers, but I mean, you know, the whole thing just.
But I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people who are carers actually say, I don't, you know, respite care is an option. But actually for a lot of people, their cared for person going into respite care can be quite challenging in itself. It's not necessarily the solution that they're looking for, and what they often want is much more help on a day-to-day basis, which, as Councillor Goldsack was saying earlier, you know, the help with shopping, the help with prescriptions, the help with visits to the hospital, visits to the doctor, all those very practical things that make, if combined together, make a massive difference to someone who's a carer. And I think that's, in a way, where I feel we should be focusing our attention, is how do we sustain all the support that has gone into being generated through local communities as a result of the pandemic. I think that's the big opportunity ahead of us, really.
Has it, I mean,
Wendy just wanted to add something there.
I just wanted to say that, you know, during the pandemic, the County Resource Hub actually worked with the adult operations to phone every carer that we knew of and put really key messages on the website around where carers could phone in for help. And what a lot of the carers fed back was they so appreciated the fact that someone had even bothered to phone, but what they did want was some practical help and support. And through the Community Resource Hub, using redeployed staff, which includes some of our library staff, they were able to go out and provide that practical help. It might have been a bit of gardening, helping to change the bed, just doing some very, very practical things. And I absolutely know that Adrian Chapman, through the Think Communities and the Community Partnership Committee, is looking to want to continue that to support carers specifically. So that, I think, is incredibly positive.
Could I suggest that, I mean, you know, I'm one of the many people, you know, who volunteered, you know, at the beginning of the thing, but never really got onto any volunteering program. You know, I would have been, and, you know, in principle still would be, you know, very happy to do a sort of buddy arrangement with a carer, you know, to make friends with them, to, you know, and to be, you know, to offer that kind of a service. I think there must be thousands and thousands of people who feel that their volunteering, you know, offers were not really, have not, and, you know, it's natural, such vast numbers of people came forward that in a way there was a sort of surplus. It's all terribly understandable, but I think that some kind of buddy system for carers, as an ongoing thing actually, but especially at the moment, honestly might really solve some of these problems, really solve them, you know, because you're all saying, and I accept, you know, I entirely understand that this is about the small things. And that seems just something so right for volunteers, not even necessarily redeployed staff, and, you know.
That absolutely hits the nail on the head, Nicola. I really think it does. And I mean, I can speak in my district council patch, just running a volunteer service in just 2 small villages, where we had pretty much 3 times the number of volunteers compared with the numbers of people actually wanting help and support. And actually that service is still going strong, and it hasn't waned in terms of enthusiasm at all. And I've still got new people needing help and support as well. And I think it's massive, just that thing that somebody knows they've got a telephone number, they've got a friend, it's somebody who's going to properly respond. They know that if they can't help that day, they will responsibly hand it on to someone else. They're not going to be left in the lurch. It's absolutely massive. And I think if carers had that, it would be a huge lifeline. And it's unbelievable how little tiny things can sustain people and help them feel like they're supported and that they're not on their own. I think it's really, really massive. And there's a huge amount of effort going into the districts, working with county and the local voluntary groups to try and keep all of that alive and keep it going and keep it with a beating heart, because it is absolutely Think Communities and neighbourhood cares. It's everything that we worked for in Soham and St Ives and was so successful. So you've kind of hit the nail on the head, really, and it's what we've been striving for all this time. So it's critical that we try and keep it going.
Would it be possible, you know, that I ask that this is looked into, for, you know, specifically just a simple buddy system, you know, as you say, when I say simple, nothing
specifically for carers,
you know, specifically for carers. Yeah,
I think it's a really important part of the Think Communities thing, isn't it? I think it's a great idea that we put that label on it as well. Councillor Goldsack, you wanted to come in?
Just a very quick thing. I applaud Nicola for bringing this up, and the officers. I think it's a fantastic idea. What I would suggest is, I think a buddy system for the carers is a responsibility for the council, and I think that's something we should be looking at. A buddy system for those that are being cared for, I think that's where the voluntary sector really has stepped up and can step up more and do. But I just want, you know, there is a link between them, but I don't think it can go all the way through just the council. That was the point I was trying to make. Totally back what Nicola's saying. I think it's a fantastic idea, but let's see what we can do with it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good conversation. Okay, members, so we're asked to note and comment on the progress made, which I think we've done. And once again, thank our officers for all of their efforts on every front across the council around this stuff. Okay, members, moving on to item 7, which is the Adults Committee Agenda Plan and Training Plan. You've had a new version of the forward agenda sent to you, I think, was it yesterday or today? I can't remember, Tamar.
Yeah.
And just to note that we are proposing not to have the meeting in August, and the forward agenda is there. And I did just notice, Tamar, from the discussion today about housing related support, that we need to add in the housing related support strategy to come back in October, because that was in the timetable in the paper that we had to committee today. So that probably needs adding in there, and we just need to probably look at that October date just to make sure everything that's on there is manageable, because it's looking quite full all of a sudden. So we just need to look at that. Did any members have any questions or anything else on the forward agenda or the training plan? No? Okay, well, on that basis then, the next meeting is due to happen on the 10th of September. Thank you ever so much, everybody, officers and members, for your attendance. Good to see you all, and see you again soon. Thanks, everyone. Declare the meeting closed.